Why hello there, and welcome back to the Video Dungeon, where I dredge the darkest depths of degenerate cinema. And in this episode we'll be looking at Video Violence, a 1987 straight-to-video, shot-on-video, and video-themed horror movie, because in the 1980s, the future was video. So let's get into Video Violence. Video Violence opens with a prologue in which a woman shops for a shirt. She goes to the dressing room and these dudes get a little creepy, and then a lot creepy, and then a little murdery, then extra creepy, and then we are murdered into the title card. Then the opening credits with some classic car driving shots that eventually take us to a somewhat familiar looking video store to drop off a tape. And with the finale of the exciting tape returning scene, we move on to Day 1. We are introduced to Rick, recently returned college student, and Steven Emory, new in town owner of the video studio. They discuss the unfriendliness of the locals and lay out some important plot points.
Everyone who comes in here has had a VCR for at least a year or so, and the nearest rental store is about 15 miles away.
But what's this? It seems someone accidentally returned a personal tape in place of the one they rented. Rick wants to watch it, but Steven doesn't think it's anything interesting. Eventually, Rick convinces him that they should take a look, and it turns out to be some kind of horrific scene that
Looks very, very real.
And Rick believes that it is real because he recognizes the victim as the old postmaster who supposedly retired a few years back and moved to Florida. The bloody scene continues, and Mr. Emory decides that they need to tell the police. So he goes off to do that, while Rick stays with the tape, which I'm sure will work out just fine. A short jog later, and Mr. Emory is in the police station and explaining the situation to the sweater-vested chief of police, who says that it's impossible because he personally drove Postmaster Hobbs to the airport, and even has a postcard from him. Eventually, he convinces the chief to come see the tape for himself, and a short drive later, they are back at the video studio, only to find the door unlocked and Rick missing. However, the tape is still there, so he plays it for the chief, only to find a very non-murdery party. Thinking this is all some kind of practical joke, the chief leaves Mr. Emory with a bit of advice.
You lay off them monster movies for a while. You stick with the kiddie stuff, Mr. Emory.
Later at home, Steven summarizes the first part of the movie for his wife Rachel and reiterates some important plot points.
In the few short weeks we've been here, we've got, close to 300 members? That's almost the whole population of this one-horse town. And why do they all have VCRs?
She doesn't believe that it's all real, but says that she'll try to contact Postmaster Hobbs in Florida the next day. Which is, of course, Day 2. The next morning, Rick is still nowhere to be found. Well, maybe not nowhere. A woman comes in to rent Blood Cult, and I think the movie tries to make some kind of point.
R.
Is that for nudity?
I really don't know, but I doubt it's for nudity. It's probably for all the violence.
Oh, good. Okay, then I'll take it. The kids can watch it.
We are then introduced to Howard and Eli, who introduce us to the hitchhiker they picked up and fill her in on where this movie is going.
I'm Eli, and this is my co-host Howard, and we're going to torture and kill you.
But before we get too much into that, it's back to Mr. Emory, who, not being privy to the previous cutaway, decides to try calling Rick's house, where Rick's mother tells him that Rick left for Boston the previous night, on her comically antiquated phone. Then back to the basement, where this scene has honestly already gone on longer than it needed to, so yeah, they kill her eventually and we can move on to the town hall, where Rachel uses her position to get Postmaster Hobbs' number, but unfortunately...
I'm sorry, all long-distance circuits are busy.
Then back to the video store, where this completely non-suspicious woman leaves some very non-suspicious tapes, non-suspiciously. Meanwhile, Rachel manages to get through to someone claiming to be Postmaster Hobbs, who at least does a good enough job to convince her. Back at the video store, Steven decides to watch the new mysterious tape, which of course contains Howard and Eli entering the shop, confronting and killing Rick. This time, Mr. Emory decides to take the tape directly to the police, which he probably should have done the first time. However, while trying to watch the tape, the chief accidentally records over it, which is of course not suspicious at all. Back at home, the Emorys once again recap the events of the movie up until this point and begin to ask some important questions.
Now, why would someone murder these two seemingly unrelated people? And then why would they videotape the murders? And why would they then arrange to have you, of all people, view them?
Questions that some of which will be answered by the end of the movie. The next day, a jeep full of unnamed characters stop by the local deli, where there are just plenty of inconspicuous locals. They're just stopping by to get directions and something to drink. Something like this fresh lemonade. Tasty. The secret ingredient is poison. At this point, Howard and Eli show up to document the carnage and make it clear that the entire town is in on the whole murder outsiders thing. But also to make it unclear if they're all cannibals, because it seems like they're gonna eat these two people, but this other woman just got rolled into the river, so maybe they're cannibals. But no time to dwell on questions when the movie's ready to actually give us an answer, as this man takes a break from his dirt moving to enjoy a tape of a woman being murdered. So all of the murders are part of some kind of secret underground snuff film ring? Oh, you already figured that out. Well, okay then. And now Rachel's at the deli, where she leaves her purse unattended just long enough to have a tape slipped into it, to which she reacts totally naturally. Back at home, the Emorys watch the latest mysterious tape, which seems to be some kind of vampire movie. Despite the higher production values, they believe that this may be another real murder tape, for a variety of reasons.
First off, it was daylight. Secondly, you could see his reflection in the mirrors.
She looked genuinely surprised. I really think that they cut her.
I have to tell you, the girl, she looks kind of familiar. I mean, like a member or something.
Yeah, her. But then Rachel has an idea.
Didn't you tell me that the projectionist at your old movie theater in New York, didn't you tell me he was a horror freak?
We prefer horror enthusiast. They try calling the theater to see if he's ever heard of such a film, and eventually get through, only to get a recorded message.
It said that there was a special horror double feature tonight. Night of the Living Dead, and The Vampire Takes a Bride.
Then Rachel has some actual good ideas.
Do you want to go back to New York, or do you want to report this to the state police?
But instead of either of those, they decide to look through the video store member records for clues. Yeah, that's a better idea than taking this tape that you have that is possibly of a murder and bringing it to some kind of outside law enforcement agency. Yes, much better idea. And the next day, that's what they do. But in the middle of this, which I'm still not sure what was supposed to accomplish, a woman comes in and asks for comedy films? Which of course is odd since
The only thing we seem to rent are gory horror movies.
she explains that she's just visiting relatives and also finds it odd that everyone around here watches these strange horror movies that she describes as
They look kind of homemade. You know, I mean, no real plots or anything, just a bunch of senseless killings.
Steven tells her that he'd like to see one of these tapes, and she agrees to try and borrow one for him. Because he doesn't already have one of these tapes, except for, the one that he has. They see their new friend off only to watch her get abducted by Howard and Eli, and the chase is on. The very casual chase. Which eventually ends with this scene.
This is none of your concern.
I mean, seriously, what is the deal with the scene? They're just casually standing there, watching them take her into the house. Like, are they trying to play it cool? Like, they didn't just follow them there? They eventually go into the house and down into the basement, which is always a good idea. But this movie has one last twist in store, as they find the supposed victim was actually in on it, and she explains what's going on for anyone who hasn't figured it out yet.
Well, you see, we like to make our own brand of down-home snuff movies.
She further explains that anyone passing through or anyone who tries to leave town ends up getting cast in these films, and furthermore that they need a place to rent their special tapes. A place like the Emorys happen to have. Of course, a change of management will be in order. By which of course I mean murder. which leaves only the epilogue, where we see the video studio under new management and freshly stocked with down-home snuff films, and also showing a preview of the latest upcoming film, starring the Emorys. The end. And there we have it. Video Violence. A movie about
Video murders and conspiracy in the town of unfriendly people who all have VCRs.
And honestly, not that bad. I mean, it's not great or anything, but it's not Butcher Knife. Overall, the idea is something of an interesting modern take on the murderous small town concept, but I find that the execution is a little bit lacking. Mainly, the plot is just weirdly convoluted. Like, the end goal here was to murder the Emorys and take over their video store. Like, why slip a tape to Steven and then kill Rick and switch out the tape while Steven is at the police station, and then fake a call with Postmaster Hobbs to make it seem like he might not be dead, and then slip them another tape, and then have the police chief accidentally erase that tape, and then slip them a third tape. But this third tape has been made to look like it might be a real film and not just a snuff film, and then fake another call to make it seem like that might actually be a real film and not a snuff film, and then stage a kidnapping to lure them into the basement to kill them. The vast majority of those steps are unnecessary for this plan, especially considering that it is shown that the townsfolk don't have any problem with just grabbing people and murdering them in broad daylight. Also, like, a main plot point is that all of the people in this town only rent the violent horror movies, and, like, I've encountered quite a few people who I kinda got the impression the only reason that they watched horror movies is because they did not have access to snuff films, but these people do, and it's established that that is their primary form of entertainment. So why would people whose primary form of entertainment is watching actual violence and murder want to watch simulated violence and murder in large quantities? I don't get that part. And once again, I am probably putting considerably more thought into this than anyone should, so I'll just say that overall it is not that bad of a movie. Of course, my standards in that particular area are extremely low. The plot is a little weird, there's some unnecessary and unnecessarily long scenes, and the effects are acceptable at best, but it's the kind of weird thing that you can only get in a 1980s straight-to-video horror film, and if you go into that particular thing expecting objective quality, well, that's really more your problem than it is the movie's. Alright, thank you for joining me here in The Video Dungeon. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit that like button, and join me next time when I will be looking at Video Violence 2. Unfortunately. Well, until next time.